us. We have Manuel Solorzano here. He is the RVP for Latin America. He also works with our United Franchise Group team here out of the West Palm Beach office. He's based out of South Florida. And he is a wealth of resources when it comes to visas, investments, and how to really navigate this whole world that we get quite a bit of questions on in terms of the businesses that we have for sale when we have an investor looking to come to the States, and what types of visas and how to navigate that process. So I'm going to let Manuel take over. He'll have your presentation. We'll take questions on the chat box. So remember, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in there. And towards the end, Manuel will answer those as well. So without further ado, Manuel, please take it away.
Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, all the people from Transworld who's going to be connected today in this webinar. I'm going to start with a brief presentation of myself. My name is Manuel Solorzano, and I'm originally from Caracas, Venezuela. I've been in the US about 22 years now. And basically, I'm the RVP, the Regional Vice President for Latin America, but at the same time, I'm the director of the E2 visa program for United Franchise Group. And I usually, like to start this type of presentation, which I usually give to, clients that are coming from Latin America, thinking about investing in the US, because, I think our mission statement in United Franchise Group and our statement of purpose are very in line to what, someone that is coming to this country to invest need to know. And basically, yes, the first thing is, our mission statement, which is that we have one customer, our franchisee. If they're successful, we're successful. So if this franchisee is a foreigner, is someone that is coming, from other country, like I did 22 years ago, it's important that, the franchisor, or if they're working with an agent, like, a Transworld agent, give them, all the details that are important when you're coming to this country. And that's why this, falls in line with the statement of purpose when we say that we encourage people become successful entrepreneurs to enhance their lives and also their communities. It's very important that they, the people that is coming from other country know that when they come to the US, they get involved with the community. I haven't met in 22 years that I've been here in the US, I haven't met that successful entrepreneur who hasn't been in some way involved with their community, either with their church, with their local club, or their local school, or a small, football team or baseball team from their community. If you don't get involved with the community you're going to be in doing business, it's very, very difficult to become successful as a franchisee or as an entrepreneur. Okay. And United Franchise Group, and now, Star Growing Brands, works as a community by itself. We call it ecosystem, but it's a community that now is about 1,600 franchisees. And you can see there that, there's Transworld as a brand, but there are other brands that, work within each other and, work helping each other as a community. And that investor knows that he's going to be already, get involved within a community of franchisees and also, within a community of the city or the state where they're going to be doing business. Something very important that I want to tell you, I have a background in law. I'm actually a Venezuelan attorney. I was an attorney back in Venezuela, but I cannot practice law here in this country because I never, get a license to practice law. Basically, I'm going to be speaking, and that's what I do with my clients from my experience, because I'm an immigrant myself who came to this country actually through an investment. And also I've been doing this for many years now, first as a consultant, a franchise consultant for a company that used to work a lot with Latin Americans, and then as an independent broker, business broker, and franchise broker. here in Florida. So it's important, and this is something that, throughout the process, I tell, all of our clients that they need to, if they want to be successful in doing, their investment and visa process, they need to hire an attorney, a licensed U.S. attorney, immigration attorney. And that's very important that you always tell them that. So based on my experience, we're going to be talking about 5 different type of visa today. Of course, the most important is going to be the E-2 visa. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about other type of visas, because in my case, I come from Venezuela, and Venezuela doesn't have a treaty, a commerce treaty with the US. So people from Venezuela, for example, they're not going to be able to apply to a E-2 visa. And you might get people from countries like Venezuela or other countries in Asia or in Africa that they won't be able to apply for a E-2 visa, because that comes, based on a treaty. But they still can have, options if they get, a good immigration attorney, and you can explain to them at least, what are the basic requirements on those type of visas, they will be able to, do an investment and also get a visa in order to come to the US with their precise investment. So let's start with the E1 visa, which is very similar to the E2, but it's based not on an investment, but in trade. In this case, this special type of visa is for people that has been doing, trade and has a treaty with the US as well. Sometimes that treaty is the same one that, give a base to the E2 visa, but sometimes it's different. This visa will allow the people who is doing trade with the US to work in the US, and also their family, their immediate family. That means his or her spouse and their kids, who are 21 years old or younger. The requirements, first of all, same as the E2 visa, and we're going to go to the E2 right away, is that there needs to be a treaty that give, the right to these people to be able to apply for this type of visa. So I'm going to give you some of those countries that will be able to, apply for a E1 visa, based on what we as a StarPoint Brands and UFG, a United Franchise Group, think that are focus countries, because we get a lot of, leads and people that from those countries that want to come to the US: Argentina, Australia, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica. In Europe, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and also Mexico and Paraguay. I mean, those are countries that will be, able to apply for a E1 visa. There's a complete list, and probably at the end of this webinar, we're going to share this presentation, and you can, check out that list on that link over there. If you, as a country national, don't find your country of nationality in that list, you won't be able to apply to a E1 visa. So the first very important requirement is that there is a treaty, between the US and the country from where you're from, basically. This visa is based on trade. It's not based on the investment. So in this case, we're going to be talking that the person or the company, that it's owned by this person from, let's say, the guy from Argentina needs to be doing business and trade with the US already. And that trade could be, goods, money, or services. But there has to be a relationship already between that person and the US. And that relationship needs to be showing that there's meaningful and substantial trade between that person and the US. All right. If there is no trade, if there is not a relationship between that person and the US that can show, that trade. For example, let's say, I'm going to give you an example of something that I saw, a few months ago. There was a guy from Pakistan who had already a company who was, selling goods to the US. And he could show, that substantial amount of trade for goods that he was exporting from Pakistan to the US. So he was able to get a E-1 visa because of that relationship of trade. That trade must be substantial, and the immigration officer needs to see that that trade is going to be sufficient to ensure continuous flow of trade between the person and in the country where they're from and the US. If they cannot show that to the immigration officer, you're not going to be approved for this type of visa. Now let's talk about the E-2 visa, which is the most important and the one that we see like every day, the bread and butter. I mean, it's the real investor's visa, what we call an investor's visa in this case. And it's basically also based on a treaty. You need to have a treaty in place between the country of your nationality and the US in order to be able to apply for this visa. It's the most approved visa right now in the US. It has a little bit over 89% of approval rate with the immigration department here in the US. And it's a visa that is going to be given for a certain amount of time, usually between 1, 3, or 5 years, but it can be extended or renewed indefinitely as long as the business is, operational. So requirements for this type of visa. First of all, you need to be a citizen of a E-2 visa country. So that's what we're going to talk about another options. Because, for example, people from Venezuela, they won't be able to, like myself, they won't be able to apply for this type of visa. But and I'll give you, a short list right now of what we call the focus countries. People from Argentina will be able to apply for this visa. Australia, Canada. We get a lot of people from Canada now, coming to the US as investors and buying, either businesses or franchises to be able to apply for this visa. Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, and Latin America, Paraguay and Mexico as well. And then in Europe, peoples like France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and we also have people like, countries like Egypt and Pakistan. They can apply for this type of visa as well. Very important that the person that is going to do the investment has ownership control over the entity that is going to do the investment here in the US. So at least you need to be an owner of 50% of the business that is going to buy either, the independent business or the franchise. The investment has to be substantial. And this is a requirement that probably is we're going to get a lot of questions, because I usually get this type of questions from people from all the countries that are coming to the US, because sometimes people will tell you, okay, but can I invest, $100,000 or $60,000 or $150,000? In this case, the law doesn't require an exact amount of dollars of the investment. The law only says that the investment has to be substantial. So in my experience, I have seen attorneys work cases with investments of about $65,000. But I've also seen attorneys that they want to do the investment, over $100,000 or $150,000. But that's going to depend on, the specific case. And that's better, to leave to the attorneys to work it out with our clients. I've seen many different, investments that are deemed and considered substantial with different ranges in amounts. What it is important though, is that the money should be invested, should be at risk. I mean, and I think, many years ago with this type of visa, you could work out like a business plan and say that you were going to invest the money and you could get, these visas approved. But nowadays, and the law says that the money should be at risk. So at least, you have had to invest the money and buy the business or pay the franchise fee or, start, looking for a location and pay a deposit for the rent. So the immigration officer can see that the money is invested and is at risk here in the US. It cannot be, a marginal investment. It has to be substantial. And that investment on a business plan that you need to prepare, that your client is going to need to prepare, must show that you're going to be able to live with your family out of the, income that investment is going to be giving you in the future. You have to have a premises. I mean, you cannot do a business that is run by, your house. You need to have a lease agreement, or buy a property from where you're going to operate your business, and you have to create employment. Those are the basic requirements that, most of the attorneys will tell you that you need to fulfill in order to get this type of E-2 visa approved. At least one employee. That's going to depend, on how the business plan is going to look and how the business is going to look. But certainly you have to show the US and the immigration department that you're going to be creating employment here in the US as well. There's another type of visa, the L1, which is more like an executive transfer visa, and it's some sort of employment-based visa, but people use it, and that's where I have, personal experience. People use it when they don't have access to that treaty. They don't have their country of nationality. They don't have, the treaty with the US. So you won't be able to apply for a E-2 visa. But if you have a business going on and operational in your country of origin, you can open a subsidiary of that business here in the US. And then if you have been an employee on that company, you can be transferred to the US to work on that subsidiary. So that's, as the concept says, the L1 visa will allow companies to transfer certain employees from the country of origin to the US. That's what I did basically when I came here 22 years ago. We didn't have access to the E-2 visa because Venezuela didn't have a treaty with the US. But we had a company, doing business in Venezuela, and we opened a subsidiary. So the subsidiary is going to be opened by that same business that is operational in your country. And if you have been an employee of that company, you can be transferred to the US. So you need to prove that you have been an employee of that company in your country of origin at least 1 year during the previous 3 years. That's basically the requirement. And the company in your country of origin needs to be the owner or the controlling owner of the company that you're going to open here in the US to operate that business or a franchise, right? The visa grants, work permit during the length of the visa. The difference between this visa, though, and the E-2 is that only can be extended for a maximum amount of 7 years. So it usually is given to you for 1 year, and then you can renew it for 2 periods of 3 years each. And in those 7 years, you need to do something so you can get, your permanent residence, because otherwise you're not going to be approved to continue having your L1 visa for more than 7 years. That's difference to the E-2 visa. The E-2 visa, since you're an investor and it is based on your treaty, you can renew it as long as the business is operational and working perfectly here in the US. But this L1 visa works as an option for people that doesn't have that treaty. Then there are 2 different types of visa which give you direct access to the green card, to the permanent residence. So this is what is called immigrant visas. The other visas were more like non-immigrant visas. In this case, this is an immigrant visa. and it will give you directly, the permanent residence. The EB1Z visa, which is very similar to the L1A visa, and is what usually, these people that are coming to the US with the L1 visa, they can change that in the process to a EB1 visa. The requirements are very similar to the L1 visa. The applicants must be employed as an executive of a multinational company. So the company has to be, in another country and has a subsidiary here in the US. And you need to have a job offer from that employer, from that subsidiary here in the US. So that's why L1 visa holders, when they're already here in the US, if the company, the subsidiary here in the US is doing well, they can change that petition to a EB1C visa. So they can apply for a change of status and make their visa an immigrant visa, and then, at the end, get their permanent residence. It is recommended, though, that with this type of visa, that company that is going to support that job offer for the petitioner have, a structure and have, more than 15 employees, because you're going to need to show to the US that, when you're coming here, you're not going to be taking other people's job, but you're coming because you're actually working in an organization, in a structure that you're going to be taking decisions and actually creating other jobs. So that's what they called, attorneys called the multi-level management structure. And you're going to come as a manager, but you're going to be having under you a structure of employees that are going to be, making that a business profitable and successful. And then the final immigrant visa is the EB5 visa, which is, for investors as well. It's pretty similar to the E2 visa, but doesn't have the requirement of being in a country that has a treaty. It's basically a visa that was created for investors to obtain that permanent residence directly, but by investing a significant amount of money. And in this case, that amount of money is actually established in the law. And it's basically in two ways. If you're on a TEA area, which is a targeted employment area in the US, that investment has to be at least $800,000. And a TEA employment or targeted employment area is basically a place where the US thinks that, the employment is low. So you're going to be making that investment and you're going to be creating more employment, because there's a requirement for this visa that it needs to create at least 10 formal employments. If you don't create 10 employments, or you don't invest those $800,000, basically your visa is not going to be approved. And there are other requirements that are very important. But in this case, if you fulfill these two requirements, you're going to be getting, directly your permanent resident visa. Usually it's a permanent residence that has a contingency or a condition, but after 2 years, you're going to be able to become a permanent resident, with no condition at all. If you're not in one of those targeted employment areas, the investment is going to be $1,050,000. So every place that you're going to do an investment that is not considered a target employment area, the investment is going to be actually higher in this case. And in this case, the requirement of creating at least 10 employments is the same as, as the one that when you're investing in a business that is on a TEA area. That investment could be approved by a USCIS or Department of Immigration approved regional centers. In this case, everything works different. And basically when I get a client that is asking for a regional sentence, a regional center, I usually, take it directly to attorneys because they know exactly what, type of investments are required for this regional centers approved by the USCIS. And it's very important that the applicant, the investors, can prove that this money that they're going to be investing in the US come from legitimate sources. So in this case, the due diligence from the US is going to be very, very detailed. So, these applicants need to prove that their money has come from legitimate sources, from, either inheritances or money that they have, saved from their jobs in their countries of origins. But it's very important that, they worked out with their attorneys and they prove in this due diligence that they have got that money legitimately. As I told you at the beginning, we have 3 main allied immigration firms that we work with. And basically what we have done is, work with them and see, that they are very good in what they do. And also that they can, give different ranges and retainers in how much money they're going to be charging. Because we get a lot of people, for example, that sometimes they're on a budget and they cannot expend, $15,000 in immigration in attorney's fee. So that's why we have 3 different levels of immigration firms that work with us. In the top level, we work with Ackerman Law, which is about a 700 attorneys firm here in the US. Strong presence in Florida, in many cities, West Palm Beach. They have offices. They also have offices in Miami, and they range between $12,000 to $50,000 in retainers for an immigration process on an E-2 visa. Their main contact is Maria Casablanca, who is the head of the immigration department. And we usually work with them and with people that, have other type of needs, so they can have a one-shop legal firm that can work everything with them, basically, either if they need to talk about, taxes, or, how they're going to be moving all their money from their country to the US. This big firm could help, but certainly, the retainers are going to be a little bit higher, on the higher end. Then we have a mid-size law firm, Friedman Law, that we work with a lot too. Natalia Friedman, who is the main contact, she is originally from Argentina. So usually when I have, clients that are coming from Argentina, it's good that I refer to them because she understands perfectly, how people from Argentina come to this country and with the E-2 visa. And they will be rate, the retainers are going to be ranging between 10 to 12,000. And for people that is looking for a smaller firm, this could be a good option. And then we have a small law firm, which is Business Immigration Group. They're based in Miami. Their main contact is their attorney, Oscar Betancourt. And, their prices are between $8,000 to $10,000. And for people that is coming to the US on a budget, usually, I refer them to them because they're very good and they have given us very good results already with most of our clients. And but in this case, people will be able to, save a little bit of money on those retainers for this process. I usually end up with a photo of our company and our headquarters here in West Palm Beach. It's important that people knows that we as franchisors, and I think that, Transworld as agents or as franchisees, when they're working with people that are coming from other countries, they need to let them know that they need to get involved in their community. And usually you worked as an agent, but you also worked as an advisor with them. So I think it's important that they get the message that when they're coming from another country, they need to kind of bring their money, but at the same time, they need to bring their willingness to be networking and to get involved in their community. So in that way, their businesses are going to strive, and they also are going to be better entrepreneurs, but also better persons within the community. So it's very important that they know, and that's why you should tell them. And that's my part in working as a E2 visa director with them, is that they need to get really involved, and they need to get the feeling of being in a community here in this country, so their businesses can get successful as well. So that's why I usually end with that purpose that I told them, that I told you guys at the beginning. I mean, we are here to help that people become successful with their entrepreneurships, but also to enhance their lives and be better persons within the community, be better with those relationships. Because if you don't do either one of them, I mean, you can bring a lot of money to this country, but if you don't get involved within your community, probably your investment is not going to be as successful as when you get the feeling of being involved in a community. So that's it for now.
Great. And thank you, Manuel. We did have a couple of questions, so I'm just going to read them out loud while I have you here. Somebody asked if the slides are available in other languages like Spanish or French.
No, I'm working on the presentation in Spanish, but there is important fact right here is that we in United Franchise Group, all of our trainings are in English. So I do usually the process of discovery in Spanish with my prospects and my clients, but I usually tell them that, in order to get in the community and get involved and do networking and really get that feeling of becoming part of your community, you need to start learning English. And it was difficult for me. I mean, I came here with 29 years old with no English at all. But I mean, if you don't get that language here in the US, and that's what I tell them, if you not start from day one, making sure that you're going to be able to speak English, you're not going to be able to network and be part of that community that I'm talking about. So that's why I usually, these type of presentations, I give them those in English, although that, I can translate, of course.
Let's do that. Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. Somebody asked if there's a situation with a brand from a different country that use AFI to get an E2 visa. So they franchised their model and came in through an E2 visa. Do we have anybody that did that?
I haven't done it. I haven't seen it myself, but I know it's something that we could do, because I've spoken about that with our attorneys, our firms. And certainly if you have let's say that you have, a concept back in your country, in Argentina, for example, you have, 5 different locations of a restaurant, or in Panama, that's another country that I have, a client that is working now with IFI. If they have 3 or 4 restaurants working in Panama, and they want to become franchisors here in the US, and you can prove that you're doing an investment to become a franchisee here, a franchisor, I'm sorry, and you open a flagship store, which is usually the requirement, I'm pretty sure that you're going to be able to apply for an E2 visa. And Panama is a focus country and it's an E2 visa country. So I think in this case, we haven't done it yet because we're in the phase of developing the franchise here in the US. But I think that, at the end, his vision and the client's vision is to open that flagship and then apply for a E2 visa so he can start working out his franchise here in the US.
Perfect. Another question is if we can get a list of those targeted employment areas. Is there a list available for those?
I think there's a list, but that changed a lot. I mean, there's not a list like the list of countries that I can that I put the link on the presentation, but I can get a list and then probably tell you when he has changed. I can get that list with one of our attorneys, and I'll send it to you so you can share it, because I usually look for those and I cannot find them like on the internet or at the USCIS website, but I know that the attorneys, they usually give it to you.
Yeah. Another question regarding the E2 visas. Can those convert or transfer to a permanent residence over the years?
No, directly. I mean, the E2 visa is a non-immigrant visa, and that's important if you want to be honest with your client, that you tell them that from the beginning. You cannot, like the L1, that you can change it to a EB1, for example. E2, it's a non-immigrant, and it's impossible to make it, directly a permanent residence. But what people does is that once they're here in the US, they prepare a strategy with their attorneys, and they start working on a perm or an employment-based visa. And in that way, they can, then change to a permanent residence.
Okay, so in regards to that E2 visa, can an investor get the E2 visa, sell the original business they came in on, and then reinvest the money into another business and stay here? Or does it have to always be tied to that one business that they got the visa?
That can be done, because I've seen it. And usually the thing is that, when you're gonna buy a first business, you incorporate with an entity here in the US, let's say a corp or an LLC. If that LLC, it's still, doing business, but now with a different type of business that they bought, you still can renew your visa with no problems. And let me give you an example. You started out buying a franchise, for example. Let's take one of our franchises, Signarama. But then you sold it along the way, but you kept the entity, the corporation that you funded when you bought that franchise. And now you decided to buy, an independent business in some other type of industry. But you can prove to the immigration department that entity is still doing business, that there is a substantial amount invested, and also that you're making money with that business. You can certainly, be renewing your visa as many years as you want. I've seen it done. I've seen people done it.
Great. Another question here: does Russia and Ukraine work for an E2 visa?
No, they're not in the list, and I have the list right here. Let me show it to you, the complete list. Hold on a second.
And then it says, so in regards to this question, someone has a client who has 7 successful stores, they're med spas, and they're here in America. He's creating a franchise. He wants to bring some people from Ukraine and Russia to get them acquired as a franchise.
That's a very good question, more like for an attorney, but I'm pretty sure that Russia, that cannot apply for a E2 visa. So I don't think he's going to be able to bring people from those 2 countries in either case. Let me see if I want to pull out the list so we can see it. But I cannot do it. No. I couldn't do it.
Okay. So we have another question.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm checking the list, and I want to make sure that, we're doing it right. Ukraine, they can apply. They have E2 visa. They can apply to a E2 visa because there's a treaty between Ukraine and the US, not Russia though. So I'm checking the list right here. I wanted to share with you, but I cannot do it. But this is something that you can find pretty easy on the link that I put on the presentation.
And we'll send the presentation over to everybody so
Yes.
we have it.
But yes, Ukraine can, Russia cannot.
Gotcha. Another question on the process. So how long is the E2 visa process? let's say somebody's interested in a franchise and the franchisor approves the buyer. How long before that investor comes here?
Yes, that's a very good question. And, I usually gonna tell you that in my experience, I see that it's gonna depend on even the country from where you're coming. For example, people from Colombia, I've seen a couple of things, a couple of issues right now that the U.S. consulate in Colombia wasn't at the moment. I don't know if they changed that already in the last days, but they were not processing E2 visas. So if you were from Colombia and you wanted to apply for a E2 visa, you had to go to another country different than Colombia to get your visa. So in that case, if you're from Colombia, your process was taking longer than usual. And I was seeing, time frames between 12 to 14 months to get that visa approved. But if you're in a country like, for example, Argentina, I've seen people that they get their visa in 6 months, sometimes less than that, 4 months, once they do the application. But I would say that in general, it's going to range between 6 months to 12 to 14 months, depending on on what country you're from, and some other, things that are personal to each applicant. And that's why you need to talk to an attorney, because the attorneys, they have that like for every day, and they know exactly what consulate is working and what consulate is not working any particular type of visa. So that's why, it ranges between, I would say, 6 to 12 months.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes sense. Those were the questions that came in. We will send the recorded session with a presentation and the contact information to everyone in the network. So if you have any questions, you can use those resources that will be sent out to everyone. Manuel, thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate your help and your knowledge with this particular Oh, we've got just one more question as I'm wrapping things up, but thank you so much for taking the time. And just one last question before we go, just because it just came in. Does the client have to apply from their country to get an E2 visa, or they come to the USA as a tourist and put their business in contact and stay here until the visa is granted?
I've seen that they could do it either way. I mean, you can do it from your country of origin, and you can come with a B1, B2 visa and start, the process of doing the investment, and then you come back to your country and you get the visa on your consulate. But I've seen people that has come with a different type of visa, not only the tourist. I've seen people with student visas, for example, right here, that they apply for a change of status and they get approved on their E2 visa as well. So that, of course, needs to be strategized and needs to be planned with their immigration attorney, but I've seen it both ways, from their countries of origins or here. And I wanted to tell you, Mariana, because you were saying already that we're almost done, that I work with United Franchise Group, and so we are franchise source of all of TransWorld agents.
Yep.
So if you need me, I mean, you're gonna have my contract, you can call me and I can give you, like particular tips for every agent that is here in Florida or any other part in the US.